Before the night, Paris erupted in blue, white, and red. Before the fireworks, before Zidane's name became legend, France stood on the edge of something far less glorious: collapse. In the early 1990s, the French national team was a story of almost, of potential that never delivered. A nation rich in talent but starving for unity. Twice they failed to qualify for the World Cup, in 1990 and again in 1994. A humiliation for a country that saw itself as a football power. France wasn't just missing tournaments, it was missing an identity. There were stars, no doubt, Cantona, Papin, Ginola, but there was no harmony, no direction, and in the chaos came the heartbreak. None more bitter than October 17th, 1993. France needed just a single point against Bulgaria to qualify for the 1994 World Cup. The match was in Paris. The home crowd expected a celebration, but in the final minute, Emil Kostadinov broke through and shattered the dream. Bulgaria won. France was out. It wasn't just a loss, it was a national wound, the kind that lingers, that makes people question everything: the system, the coach, the soul of the team. A generation that could have conquered was suddenly seen as cursed. Something had to change. The French Football Federation responded with more than just tactical adjustments. They built infrastructure, emphasized youth development, and turned to a quieter, more disciplined approach. But more than that, they waited for a leader, someone who could carry the weight of a fractured team and a restless nation. By 1996, under Aimé Jacquet, a new vision was forming. The team was becoming younger, more diverse, more disciplined. The flamboyance of Cantona gave way to the calm control of Laurent Blanc. The raw brilliance of young talents like Thierry Henry and David Trezeguet was beginning to rise. But even then, something was missing. The crown had no center. The orchestra had no conductor. France was on the edge. A team with all the pieces, but no one to bring them together when it mattered most. No one who could rise in the moment and say, "Follow me." That someone was already coming, quietly, elegantly. From the streets of La Castellane, a boy named Zinedine Zidane. And the world had no idea what was about to begin. Before he was a name chanted in stadiums, before he was the face of victory, Zinedine Zidane was just Zizou, a quiet kid with magic in his feet and fire in his chest. Born in La Castellane, a tough neighborhood in Marseille, Zidane didn't come from privilege or pedigree. He came from the street, from concrete pitches and late-night kickabouts under flickering streetlights. Football wasn't just a game there. It was language, escape, identity. Zidane played with elegance, but lived with edge. He didn't run, he glided. He didn't dribble, he danced. From an early age, coaches noticed something different. Not just skill, but vision. He could see the game before others even moved. He didn't just pass the ball, he passed through time. His rise to the youth ranks led him to Cannes, then Bordeaux, where the world outside France began to take notice. He wasn't flashy in the traditional sense. No stepovers, no tricks for the sake of it. Everything had a purpose. One touch to destroy pressure, one pass to unlock a wall. He played like a chess master wearing boots. By 1996, he signed with Juventus. Italy, the graveyard of flair, became the proving ground for Zidane's genius. And he didn't just survive there, he conquered. Serie A, known for its defensive brutality, couldn't contain him. He adapted, evolved, and excelled. In a league where space was scarce, Zidane created it with a turn of the hip, a drop of the shoulder. But it wasn't just about ability, it was how he carried himself. Calm, composed, silent until the ball found his feet. Then, everything changed. He was not a typical leader. He didn't shout, he didn't wave his arms. He spoke in passes, in control, in presence. He was the eye of every storm. Back in France, Aimé Jacquet watched closely. The national team was beginning to take shape, and Zidane, now 26, was becoming its heartbeat. He wasn't there for the failures of 90 and 94, but he carried their weight anyway. The scars of those tournaments lived in every French fan. Zidane represented hope that football, this time, might finally live up to its promise. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flamboyant, but you didn't need noise when you played like that. Zidane didn't rise to the top, he rose above it. And as 1998 approached, a nation quietly realized, this might be the one. Hosting a World Cup is a gift, but it's also a burden. In 1998, France didn't just prepare for a tournament, they prepared for judgment. Every pass, every tackle, every decision would happen under the weight of a nation's expectations. They were the hosts, the spotlight was theirs, and anything less than greatness would feel like failure. The pressure was suffocating. The ghosts of 82, 86, and especially 94 still loomed large. The heartbreak against Bulgaria just 5 years earlier wasn't forgotten. It was still fresh. The French media questioned everything. Was Aimé Jacquet the right coach? Could this team score enough? And above all, was Zidane truly ready to lead? France's squad was solid, even brilliant in places. Barthez in goal, Blanc and Desailly at the back, Petit, Deschamps, and Vieira in midfield. And up front, young talents like Thierry Henry and David Trezeguet waited in the wings. But Zidane was different. He wasn't just a player, he was the heartbeat, the creator, the one everyone looked to when things got tight. And in the group stage, France impressed. 3 wins, no goals conceded. Zidane played with control and calm until a moment of fire. Against Saudi Arabia, after repeated fouls and provocations, he lashed out. A stamp, a red card, suspension. Suddenly, questions flared again. Could this team survive without him? They did, barely. Against Paraguay in the round of 16, it took a golden goal from Laurent Blanc to escape. Zidane watched from the stands, helpless, knowing that one mistake could have cost everything. But by the time he returned for the quarterfinal against Italy, France was stronger and he was sharper. The match ended in penalties and France held their nerve. In the semifinal against Croatia, Lilian Thuram became an unlikely hero with 2 goals, his only ones ever for France. The team was writing history, piece by piece, but something was still missing. Zidane had played well, yes, but he hadn't defined the tournament yet. He hadn't had his moment. That would come, and it wouldn't just be a moment, it would be the moment. As France prepared for the final against Brazil, the reigning champions, the giants of world football, the nation held its breath. The Eiffel Tower was lit up, the streets were ready to explode. All they needed now was a hero, and Zidane was ready to become one. July 12, 1998, Stade de France, a night that would become sacred in French football. On one side, Brazil, world champions, football royalty, led by Ronaldo, Rivaldo, and Cafu. On the other, France, the host nation chasing their first ever World Cup title. The pressure was immense, the atmosphere electric, and at the center of it all stood Zinedine Zidane. For much of the tournament, Zidane had been steady, controlled, even quiet, but finals demand something more. Finals demand a statement. And on this night, Zidane didn't just rise to the occasion, he owned it. From the opening whistle, France pressed with intensity. They didn't look scared, they looked ready. Brazil, surprisingly, looked off balance. Rumors swirled of Ronaldo's mysterious pre-match illness, but France didn't care. They had their own story to write. In the 27th minute, it began. France won a corner. Emmanuel Petit delivered it perfectly. Zidane, marked but focused, made his run. He rose above the Brazilian defense and crashed the ball into the net with a powerful header. The stadium exploded. 1-0, a nation erupted. But Zidane wasn't done. Just before halftime, another corner. This time from Djorkaeff, and again, Zidane. Same result, another header, another goal. 2-0. In the space of 45 minutes, Zidane had become untouchable. The quiet playmaker was now the face of destiny. The second half was tense, but France never cracked. Brazil tried to fight back, but the French defense, led by Desailly and Blanc, stood firm. And in the dying moments, with Brazil stretched and desperate, Emmanuel Petit sealed it. 3-0, the final whistle blew. History was made, France were champions of the world. The image of Zidane, arms raised, eyes to the sky, became immortal. 2 goals in a World Cup final against Brazil. On home soil, in front of millions, he didn't just deliver a performance, he delivered a coronation. For years, France had searched for an identity, for a leader, for a legend, and now they had one. His name would echo forever. Not just because of what he did, but how he did it, with grace, with purpose, with magic. That night, France was no longer just a footballing nation. It was a world champion, and Zidane, Zizou, was its king. What if Zinedine Zidane had never played in the 1998 World Cup final? What if he never made the squad at all? Would France still have lifted the trophy? Would the nation still have erupted in tears and celebration that July night? Or would the dream have collapsed under the weight of its own pressure? It's tempting to believe that France, with its deep talent pool, could have survived. The truth is, the difference between a great team and a world champion is often just one player, one mind, one moment. Zidane was that difference. His 2 goals in the final weren't just timely, they were irreplaceable. Who else in that team realistically? He drew defenders, opened space, dictated the game's tempo. His calm on the ball spread across the team like oxygen. Take him out and you lose not just his brilliance, but the belief he gave others. Imagine France trailing at halftime instead of leading. Imagine the nerves setting in, the fear, the doubt. Would they have held together? Would they have had the confidence to keep pressing? That's the risk of removing your talisman. The entire emotional structure can crumble. The 1998 World Cup wasn't just about tactics or teamwork. It was about moments, and without Zidane, France's greatest moment may never have happened. No two headers, no 3-0, no parade through the Champs-Élysées. Maybe Brazil takes the lead. Maybe Ronaldo writes a different story. Maybe France once again falls just short. Without Zidane, the crown might still be sitting in its glass case, waiting for a king who never came. When the final whistle blew on July 12, 1998, it wasn't just the end of a match. It was the beginning of a legacy. France, for the first time in its history, was world champion. And at the heart of it stood Zinedine Zidane, a quiet genius who had forever changed the story of French football. That night elevated Zidane from star to symbol. He became more than a player, he became a national icon. For millions of children, especially from immigrant families, Zidane was proof that greatness could come from anywhere. Born to Algerian parents in the rough streets of Marseille, he stood for something bigger than sport. He was the face of a multicultural France that had come together to conquer the world. The ripple effects of that win were immediate and long-lasting. Football in France was no longer burdened by the past. The stigma of failure was gone. A new generation grew up not just dreaming but believing, knowing that the impossible was now possible. The academies filled, the infrastructure improved, and the blueprint Zidane helped write became the foundation for future success. 8 years later, in 2006, Zidane returned from international retirement to lead France once more. And again, he carried them to a World Cup final. Even at 34, he was still the best player on the pitch. And though that tournament ended in heartbreak, with a red card and a headbutt that shocked the world, it only added to the myth. Zidane was human, brilliant, flawed, unforgettable. After retirement, his legend only grew. He transitioned into coaching and, with Real Madrid, won 3 consecutive Champions League titles, the first manager to do so in the modern era. His calm, his leadership, and his ability to command respect without raising his voice translated off the pitch just as powerfully as it had on it. But no matter how much he achieves for France, Zidane's story always comes back to that summer in 1998. The 2 headers, the 3-0, the sea of flags and tears. He didn't just win a World Cup, he gave a nation its proudest moment. Zidane's legacy is not just about trophies, it's about transformation. He changed the way France saw itself. He gave meaning to the word team. He reminded the world that greatness doesn't need to shout, it just needs to show up when it matters most. And when France needed him most, Zidane stood tall, and the crown found its king.